I've been through a problem. This organization, I just love them to death. But you know, they called me about 3 weeks ago and said, we might give you 10 minutes to talk. Well, I said, man, a historian needs more time than that. Then a week later, they said, how about getting it down to 5 minutes? And you know what? They came this morning and said, how about 3? And I said, I can't get my mouth open in that time. So I tell you what, guys, I hope nobody's got a stopwatch on me here. I think tonight what I really want to thank everybody for all the great support that this citizenry of Missouri has given conservation. It's in my blood. It was in my blood. It's been in my blood a long time. I need to comment about a couple of things. This things just don't happen. There's a bunch of circumstances that bring about things. I was a 17-year-old guy that was in this room in September 10, 1935. And the reason I was here was because of my dad. My dad was a master teacher in Mobley Public School System. He was a principal. He was a scientist. He was a mathematician. He was a geographer. But you know what he taught in his geography course? In the 20s, he was talking about conservation. And you know, in those days, people couldn't even pronounce it. They called it conversation. No fooling. They really did. They could not find the right terminology. Well, anyway, what happened, as time moves along, my dad got introduced to somebody. I was senior in high school, and I had a teacher, Esther Adams was her name, PhD out of Missouri. She was a great naturalist. And she was really beginning to stir me up. I was a senior, but she was teaching junior college and senior biology, pre-med, you know, all this kind of stuff. But I didn't hardly know where I was headed, but I think I was headed to being a naturalist. But anyway, she said, and this was, now listen here, the timing on this. This was February 1935. This was how many months before September 6 or 8? And she said, I'm going to have Dr. Rudolph Bennett come up here and speak to our college class about what's going on at the university in a conservation curriculum. They've got a new program down there. And she said, and she might bring somebody with him. And so my dad and I were just like that. I was an only child. Everything he did, I did. I went where he did, and he went with me. And we were great hunters. We liked to hunt together. Incidentally, anybody shoot quail in here? He was pretty good with the 410. Honestly, pretty good with the 410 on quail. But anyway, he was a true sportsman, but he had it in his blood. So he came out to that little session at the college there and listened to Rudolph Bennett expound on conservation and the new program in the conservation program at the University of Missouri. And guess who was with him? E. Sidney Stevens. No fun. Mr. Stevens was traveling with Rudolph. They were both Harvard people. They had a immediate, and Stevens really was not biology oriented, but he had a sense of understanding things that he didn't understand. He was anxious for more information. So he and Rudolph Bennett had developed a real close relationship. So when Rudolph was going out and making talks, advising people to come to the program here at the university, it started in the early 30s. He took Sidney Stevens. Okay, my dad was there, and after Bennett made his speech, my dad was in the audience. He said, what are you guys doing for supper? Well, they said, we don't have any plans. We had Sidney Stevens and Rudolph Bennett to my house. for supper that night. And of course, Bennett expounded, and you know what he did? He recruited me to the university that night. I was a year or so off, but he recruited me. And what did Mr. Stevens do? He expounded on what was getting ready to happen in Missouri with an aroused citizenry about poor administration in the fish and game resource period. And so that went on. And so Dad immediately became vaccinated. There was a leader in the Randolph County by the name of C.W. Hewlin, and a friend of his was a Dr. L.A. Nickel. These two guys were Dad's hunting and fishing buddies. Well, they ended up as chairman for the Federation in proposing in going for the amendment. So time moved along, and all of a sudden, all this stuff was being generated, and so what happened? That we began to churn out all this information, and Dad and I began to put posters up all over Randolph County, and we had friends down in Howard County, and they said, we need help, come down and help post the landscape with the Proposition 4 deals. So that was the beginning of all that. So they had the meeting here. It's September 10, 1935. And at that time, that Stevens was in Moberly. He said, why don't you come down to a meeting that we're planning in September? And Dad said, I'll try to come. So he came and he drugged me along. So that's the reason that I'm here tonight. It was a good little story, and it's true, and I don't see many people around here that were here. I really don't. Well, anyway, I'm going to end this. I personally went on to a program with the game management and wildlife biology, did well, came out with a master's, worked for the conservation department, went to work in 1941. Mr. Bodie and Arthur Clark interviewed me, and I was stationed at Fredericktown, working with Vernon Bennett, the old agent down there. And then they put me back in Columbia to said, well, we need to shape up a research program, and so that's where it got started. So I was with the department 43 years, and retired out in 83, and since then I've been pretty busy. Really have. I really have. I haven't wasted much time. I have something to talk to you about, just a second. I have a drawing here, a pencil drawing, shows a couple of ducks and so forth, and the signature is Ding Darling. Ding Darling was a Pulitzer cartoonist that ended up as head of the Biological Survey of the United States. He was a commissioner of wildlife in Iowa. He was a Des Moines Register artist, and he was at the meeting here in September 10, 1935. He sat at the table with Henry Waters. Henry Waters, of course, was the editor and owner of the Columbia Daily Tribune. You all know Hank now. This was his dad. They sat at the same table. Naturally, they came together because he was a newspaper man with the Des Moines Register, and here's Waters with the Columbia Tribune. So they sat at the same table. In this room had paper tablecloths. And he doodled while everything was going on. And this is the picture. This is the original picture on that piece of paper tablecloth. And what happened after the meeting was over that day in this building, Henry Waters, he tore out this piece of tablecloth, it was ragged edges, and took it home with him. He folded it up and took it home with him. Later on, when the Henry Waters and his family decided to give a piece of land in Columbia here, 20 acres with his home and residence and everything, to the Conservation Department, his widow told me she had something. Estelle, I just loved her. She was a piano player, and I'd go over to her house, and she'd say, I don't have anybody to play for. Will you sit down and listen to my concert? And I said, sure, I'll listen. So anyway, she turned out to be a great friend. But one day she said, I've really got something that's neat, and I don't know what to do with it. So she said, here it is. It's the drawing by Ding Darling that Mr. Waters saved, and I'm going to give it to him. So immediately I took it back to the office, trimmed it out, took it down to the frame makers. It was framed. This was in about 1979, something like that. And so it's been hanging in the Fish and Wildlife Research Center on College and Stadium here in town. And not very many people have paid anything to it. When Dave and the bunch got me hooked into this meeting tonight, I said, man, I've got something. I've got the genuine artifact from this meeting. And it was done by a well-known national Pulitzer Prize artist. And so here it is. So I want you to come up and look at it. It is the genuine thing, and we're so proud. I think what I'm going to do, she gave it to me, folks. She gave it to me. But I think I'm going to give it to the Federation in a couple of years. Enough said.